Nick speaking with ECR's chairman, Nick Tulloch, this morning. Nick, good morning. How are you?
Morning, Andrew. I'm very well, thank you. Very well indeed. How about you?
I'm very good, Nick. Results in at the start of this week here on our recent drill campaign at Creswick at Kuboid Hill. Suggestions of larger ore bodies. What's your assessment, firstly, of these results?
Well, it's exactly that. The region that we're operating in is known for very sort of narrow veins, very nuggety gold. And what we think we've got, based on those results, is just as you say, a much broader mineralisation structure. The best example I can give to anyone watching is if they remember a video that Adam Jones and I did back in January, where we were standing in front of a pit just north of our Ballaston tenement. And this is a pit that looks like sort of a meteor has hit the ground. I mean, I couldn't give the dimensions, but it's actually enormous. That's an example of what might be a similar structure, not all that far away, where open cut mining has worked. Now, look, we've got a lot more work to do before we can say that that's the case at Creswick. But what we've found for the first time in our work in Creswick is the possibility that actually the structures underground might not be as narrow and might not be as nugget as we first thought. And for the technical people amongst the viewers, if they've gone through the tables and seen the number of intersections we've got at half a gram or more, you can start to see that there is quite an interesting profile building up beneath that ground.
And of course, as we said, these results were from Kuboid Hill. Important also not to forget those nice hits we got around the corner at Davey Road, including 41 grams a tonne.
Well, exactly. I mean, the headline in the Kuboid Hill announcement earlier this week was the best results were 8 grams or just over 8 grams per tonne. At Davey Road, after the bulk sampling, we were at 41. And what we found at Davey Road is that bulk sampling made quite a considerable difference to the overall results. And we're going to do the same at Creswick. And again, you can't make predictions. What happens in one region is not necessarily what's going to happen in the next. But very, very interesting results at Davey Road, which I think were beyond the top end of what we might have hoped for originally. And let's see what we get to with Creswick with similar techniques.
And look, just while we're on the subject of Victoria, given the recent cap raise, we're now funded to undertake a short work program, ideally some drilling in the near term, also at the Tambo project.
Yeah, we are. So the placing we announced in March completed on Monday this week, actually the same day we put out the Kuboid Hill announcement. So we are funded for a work program. The placing announcement that we put out listed our outline plans, and what we said on Monday is we'll finalise and refine those plans and put out a more detailed work program. But the work program is going to include Victoria. It's going to include Queensland, fairly obviously. Tambo is, I suppose, the tenement we've not done much work on over the last few months. We've been to Creswick, we've been to Ballaston. Tambo is sort of next on the list as we advance that. We did a lot of work in Lulworth, of course, last year, and there were some beginnings of what looks like to be quite an extensive opportunity happening in Lulworth. And so I think what investors should expect is we're going to be using the funds just as we've used previous funding. The idea is to get them in the ground, not sort of spend on expensive advisors or expensive persons. I've never been shy of saying we're very, very cash conscious. This is all about generating opportunities across our portfolio. And our portfolio is very extensive. And for a small company, and we are a small company, we've got a very extensive portfolio of assets to examine.
Well, look, shareholders might remember a nice little project we acquired earlier last year, Blue Mountain. We're starting to do some early work on this now.
Yeah, we've had Blue Mountain for just over a year, I think, and it was bought for shares. Not a lot has been done on it, frankly. But what we've been doing in the last few weeks is talking to people who have had prior experience in that region, and based on the way they've explained things, there are some really quite interesting prospects. I mean, I was not part of the company when we acquired Blue Mountain, but looking at it through the rearview mirror, I can see exactly why the benefits may be there. So this is clearly much earlier stage than some of the other prospects we've got, but I think what we've learned in the last few weeks is there's certainly merit in spending a bit more time there.
Nick, any updates, any further word as far as these tax losses in Australia?
Yeah, I mean, the tax losses are sort of a test of academia, really. Tax losses in Australia are not all that different to how they apply in the UK. It is possible for a company with tax losses to sell those losses to another company, for value. That buying company will then use the tax losses to offset against trading profits they make. Not dissimilar in the UK. The way the tax losses work is you have to have similarity in business. Now, our tax losses stretch back, pretty much the history of ECR. So you're going back into the early 2000s, where the first of these tax losses first materialised. You've also got, as in other jurisdictions, changing rules, and so not all of the tax losses come under the same legislation. Just as legislation has changed in Australia, we've got some different categories of tax losses. We've also got different states. I mean, the tax losses are mostly incurred in Victoria and also actually WA, where the company had some operations some years ago. And it would be no surprise to know the tax losses are mostly incurred in exploring for gold. So those are the metrics we've got to work with. The short answer is the interest and tax losses will depend very much on the buying company's particular requirements. The tax losses won't change. I mean, they're static, but what the buying company will require will be based on their own operations, their own forecasts. So we've taken some advice, taken a lot of advice actually, and the process we're going through at the moment is speaking to prospective companies who may have an interest in tax losses. It's going to be a rifle shot approach. It's not going to be something that will fit everyone. It's not the type of thing you sort of advertise like an estate agent. You go to quite particular companies, but the right company would find that actually 75 million Australian dollars of tax losses could be extremely valuable to them, and some of that value would flow to ECR. So this is probably rather like mining and exploration. It's a long-term work in progress. We might get lucky, we might strike gold tomorrow, or it might take several rifle shots, as I put it, before we find the right buyer. But it's a huge asset that sits within the company, and it would be wrong of us to not spend time to try and explore, no pun intended, how to get value out of it.
Well, Nick, a final word. Cash in the bank on the back of that recent cap raise, numerous near-term work programs. Why do you reckon investors should be upbeat about the weeks and months ahead?
Well, there's quite a lot to be upbeat about. As you say, we're funded. We've got an extensive portfolio. We have hopefully demonstrated as a management team, we're very cash conscious, very focused on putting the money in exploration activities in the ground rather than in people's pockets. And with our portfolio, with what I described in Victoria, what I described in Queensland, there should be plenty of news flow coming out. A bit more to be done on Creswick, obviously, and then thereafter we'll look at the other tenements.
Yeah, good to speak, Nick. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Andrew.